Feel like you've aged out of parenthood? Are you finally ready to be a mother, but the alarm on your biological clock has been going off for 15 years? The good news, life can change in an instant. Trust me, I should know. And remember, don't call me ma'am, call me mom. Hey everyone, welcome to Don't Call Me Ma'am. I'm Jodi Miller, and do not call me ma'am. Please stop doing that. You can, however, call me mom, because that's what I am, and these episodes are really focusing on my journey to motherhood, and my next guest is one of the people in an organization that was instrumental in making my dream come true. So I am very happy and honored to have you here because you do so much good work, and your name says it all, just your last name. Start clapping right now, and by that I mean pull over to the side of the road. I don't want you to get into an accident, for Jennifer Bliss, who is the Director of Adoptions and Foster Care at Vista Del Mar. Yay!
Thank you for having me.
Oh my God. So it's so crazy how I even found you guys. Michael Vinton and his husband, Tony, went through you guys, and I was coaching him in stand-up, and he was waiting and waiting and waiting for a baby. He's like, oh, nobody wants two gay dads. I'm like, I do. Like, adopt me. So then, you know, they got their beautiful daughter, so happy. Time goes by. All of a sudden, I'm like, I'm going to adopt. And by that time, I had started to like Google and look at other facilities, and it really just seemed like they were trying to sell me a package. Like, yeah, it really felt icky. Right. It gave me the ick every time I looked at it. It's like, we'll get you a baby. And then a lot of it was also like, with God's help. It was a lot of like Christian. I'm like, all right, settle down. I'm Jewish. I'm not even bringing religion into it. It wasn't even a factor when I was looking. I just wanted someone that was really going to help me on this journey, you know, educate me and hopefully help me find a baby. So I'm just looking at everyone's like, for $18,000, you get this. It was like
by Christmas.
Yes, by Christmas. You want a little sooner, pay a couple extra thousand. It was like it just did not feel right.
Right.
So I reached out to Michael. He told me to, you know, get in touch with you guys, which I did. Arlene immediately got back to me, and we started the process, and then I went to David Radis, who I've talked about in length, and he was great, baby rainmaker, and, you know, it just happened. And you guys, I mean, were so amazing in so many different ways, but really when I got that phone call, and I'm sure you've been there before, but for me, it was like, I got a phone call that my baby was born and I was selected. Like, it was overnight. It was an instant thing. I thought I was going to have those 3 months, 4 months, a match, get to know them, get to know myself as a future mom. But David was like, you were selected. And I said, for what? Because I just sent it in. I had just hit send. I thought he was calling to say the PDF didn't go through, the packet. Right. And he just was like, you were selected. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you have to get on a plane tomorrow and go to Kentucky. And I went into a panic, a full-blown panic. And even, you know, in the 2 weeks that she was in the NICU and I was trying to get things together, Chantilly over at Vista was, everybody was amazing. Everybody did keep checking in to see if I was okay. Because I really don't remember a lot of that time. It was a blur.
Makes sense.
And the next thing you know, she's 4 years old, screaming at me that she doesn't like my attitude when I tell her that I don't like her attitude. I'm like, wow. Look how far we've come.
Right.
But I wouldn't have it any other way. So first of all, how did you get into the adoption game? How did you get into it? Yeah.
I always knew that I wanted to do something in the helping profession.
Right.
My assumption was that I was going to be a therapist.
Okay.
And when I got my MSW and eventually my PsyD, it was a natural fit to go into the foster care and adoption world with an MSW.
Right.
While I was working towards my hours. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. I started off in the foster care world, working in the county, and transitioned to nonprofit adoption, and just fell in love with this new world of open adoption, which I had never heard of before until the interview at the agency.
Wow.
Now, this was given 20 plus years ago without dating myself.
But back then that was still relatively
very controversial.
Yes, very controversial. I mean, I had a few friends growing up that were adopted. I say that because it was always like that. It was a dirty word in a way, and it was like not talked about. They're adopted. That's her parents. She doesn't know anything about her birth parents. It was just nothing. It was nothing.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because the reason why adoptions were closed wasn't for some nefarious reason. It was because at that time when that became the current practice, 100 years ago, it was because if a woman gave birth out of wedlock, she was no longer marriage material.
That's right.
If a child was born out of wedlock, they were a bastard.
Yep.
And if a couple or a woman was experiencing infertility, it was something to be shameful of.
Yes.
So for all those reasons, a veil of secrecy had to be pulled down just so people can function within society.
Yeah.
And social workers, maybe 30 plus years ago, around that time, started re-examining, is this what's actually healthy for all the members of the adoption triad? Do we have to do it like this anymore? Because those social issues are somewhat no longer applicable. Now we can look at what's actually best practice for the emotional, psychological health of everybody involved.
Right.
And that's when the veil started to be pulled back and people were able to be more authentically and proudly involved in the adoption process.
Yep. I mean, I wasn't even aware until the first class session that I had at Vista. I remember the first phone interview, I immediately was like, oh, I want open adoption, because I never want my daughter to think that she wasn't wanted and wasn't loved. And I definitely, not every case is the same. And obviously there are some children that find out maybe they weren't wanted. I didn't know what I was going to get at the other end of that. I didn't know what Vicky, the birth mom, was going to say when I started communicating with her. She said everything I could have hoped for. I couldn't have written it any better. She was just so grateful and so kind. And I know that she's had a really rough go at it her entire life. And it actually really breaks my heart when I, hear more and more about her story from her. And the social worker in Kentucky. I know me, I'm like, if I lived in Kentucky, I would try to adopt this woman, this grown woman, because I remember thinking the big catalyst for me for adoption was, this is going to sound weird, but I was watching I Am Killer on Netflix, and it profiles people that are in prison on death row for committing one murder, usually one murder out of an act of anger, an accident, something. And all of their stories sounded very similar because they all had horrific childhoods. Not saying that people that have horrific childhoods are going to all grow up to kill somebody, or they should. It just was it was very common. Their parents were addicts. They weren't around. They were neglected. They were abused physically, mentally. And I remember just having a thought not even separate from I want to be a mom, just thinking to myself, my God, if any of those children have been adopted by a loving family, would they have gone down the exact same path? And it just sort of clicked, because I was still mourning the fact that I couldn't have my own biological child at that time. And I needed that time to mourn that. Yeah. And so when I came up to that realization, I'm going to adopt, is right when Jessica Golden started working on my game show, and she told me that her and her wife were going to foster. And I was like, okay, this is a really good opportunity for me to watch and see, how it works and everything. And it did help me decide to ultimately go with straight adoption, just because I didn't think emotionally I'd be able to handle it. Right. Because it's really difficult. I'm sure you see that. I mean,
it's intense, and the bandwidth and emotional capacity and strength and resilience it takes to be a foster parent, see it through. When your goal is to adopt, it asks so much of the heart.
So much of the heart. And I'm sure you've seen so many cases where, my friends, it happened, with Jess, it ultimately led to adoption, but my other friends who now have 2 children, but their first, they had him for a year, and then he was, reunited with his birth mom. And they knew that was always a possibility, but I think there was a part of them that didn't think it was going to happen. But they got him, I can't imagine after a year giving my daughter to someone else. Right. You know what I mean?
And as much as intellectually that your role at that point is to be that safe and loving place while his trajectory is being kind of laid out, it doesn't make the heartbreak any easier, even though your role was for that point in his life.
Right. Of course. How do you help, parents that ultimately want to adopt. And I'm sure there are some that just really want to just foster.
Which is beautiful and still heartbreaking, but they're in it because they feel this is they're mission oriented.
Right.
In that. And so there is a difference.
There is a difference. I would assume there would be a difference because I definitely, while when the birth mother contacted me and told me that she was pregnant again, I really don't think there was even a moment that I thought, I could do it. I'll take that baby. I was like, no way. Like, I'm not going to be outnumbered. Like, it's just not happening. So I knew that I wanted that baby to be in California and hopefully with people that I knew so that she would at least know one of her half-siblings because she has a lot of half-siblings. She's got 11 other half-siblings and the eldest is 30. Wow. Yeah, all over the place. So I wanted her to at least know one now, if possible. Right. But I have thought, even though that was like not a possibility for me, I have thought maybe when she's even older, like maybe I'll foster. It's such a beautiful thing, you know what I mean? But going into it, like I don't want to necessarily have another child, you know what I mean? But I would love to help another child out if I'm able to. Right. And it's, it doesn't, affect my daughter negatively either, which I don't know. That's down the road, but
at some point when she's older, she would see herself as part of the mission.
Yeah, you're right.
Like our family is helping little kids who need a safe and loving place for a short amount of time or, for however much time it needs. They're not coming in as my brother or sister.
Right.
But our family is doing this mitzvah.
Yes, it is. It's mitzvah.
And helping a child who needs a safe and loving, stable home.
Right.
And also people who go in it and foster, they do it over time. More often than not, they continue a relationship with the child once a child is in their forever home, whether that be with the biological parent, a relative, or a adoptive home, if that's the answer. Also because there's an alignment with whoever that permanent home is.
Right.
Because you are there to support and encourage and reinforce that.
Right.
So you becoming a relative winds up being natural.
I could see that definitely. I mean, it's definitely something that I've considered, again, down the road. But the heartbreak of going into it, like, so there's that side, and then the other side of like hoping that you will, because I was looking when I first decided, okay, maybe I'll adopt, maybe I'll foster to adopt. I remember thinking, these are just the thoughts that goes through a single cat lady's head at night, like, I don't even need a baby. I don't need a newborn. I'll get one that already knows how to sleep. You know what I mean? That's maybe a 2-year-old. And then, of course, you go on these pages, and it's heartbreaking. Yeah. It's really heartbreaking. I was like, I don't even know if I could do that. I just was like really, it was very emotional. So I was like, I think I have to just go the straight adoption route. Right. Are you a mom?
I am.
You are a mom.
I have 5-year-old twins, almost 5-year-old. They'll say they're 4 and 11/12.
What an age. Yeah, nobody told me about 3 and 4. Everyone just talks about the newborn, maybe the terrible 2s, and then when she's a teen. But they leave out that 3 to 5 is insanity.
It's challenging and beautiful and everything in between.
And all of the things. It's incredible.
And hysterical.
And it's hysterical. I mean, thank God I'm a comedian and I can use her for material for the rest of her life. So if somebody is listening to this or watching this and they are considering either or, what would your advice be to them if I came to you and I was like, I'm not sure if I want to foster or adopt, which route should I go?
It's not a cookie cutter answer.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it depends part of like, okay, what is your motivating factors, right?
Right.
Because if somebody says, I want to save a child.
Right.
Then foster to adoption is the way to meet that mission.
Right.
Okay. Because people are, as you know, people are lining up for these yet to be born babies.
Yes.
In situations where women who are pregnant have an awareness and a decision has been made that she feels like she can't do it in the way she wants the child to be raised.
Right.
Right. And it's voluntary and it's heartbreaking and beautiful. But it's not saving a child, right? Because if you weren't doing it, she would pick someone else in the big, vast amount of people waiting. But when somebody says, I want to adopt to save a child, that, and I'm not, and I don't want to make it like, oh my gosh, you're saving a child that would, right. But we have to look at underlying motivation. So if somebody says, I want to save a child in that realm. I would say the foster to adopt is more of that, because not a lot of people have the emotional bandwidth in their heart to go through that process,
right,
stick it out towards the end. It could be the third child in your home before you adopt.
Yeah.
Right? But that child was going through something tragic, needed a safe and loving and stable place, and you were there.
It's amazing.
Right.
That definitely. It's so funny that you said that, because when, I adopted my daughter, especially in the beginning, and people still say it now, which I'm always like, there's no reason to correct or anything, but they're always like, you saved her. Yeah. I'm like, no, if it wasn't me, it was, oh my God, it took me over like a year and a half, like waiting, you know what I mean? If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. And I'm sure they would have been a great family, and she would have led, a great life. I don't know if, they would let her fart in their face the way I do, but I'm just saying. I mean, I let her do a lot. She thinks it's hilarious. But I mean, like, when people say, and a lot of people, especially in the beginning, they're like, you saved her.
Right.
You saved her. And I would really I'm like, I didn't.
There is that narrative out there.
Yes.
Yeah. And especially because it feels, it doesn't sit right in your heart when you hear that.
It doesn't at all.
Yeah.
And also, she didn't save me either. Because then people would be like, well, she saved you. You guys saved each other. I'm like, no. If I didn't become a mother, I'd be fine. You know what I mean? I really, really wanted to be a mother.
Right.
I really wanted to be a mother. And I was doing everything in my power, from trying to get pregnant on my own, to considering surrogacy, to adoption. Like, I was all of the things, to also just surrendering it. If it was meant to be, it was going to be. But I'm going to, give it the old college try. And I know in my heart that whatever's supposed to happen will. And not the moment. I stand corrected. It wasn't the moment that I saw her. I actually didn't know. Like, my adoption was stressful because there was a pandemic happening. Mm-hmm. So no one could be there with me while I was traveling to Kentucky, which is like a foreign land. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh my God, by myself. Everything was pretty easy once I got there, but there was a lot of like, let me see your leg. Like, my brain was all over the place. And I remember I was vomiting on the plane flying out there. My body was going into shock. I didn't know what was happening. I got there alone. Right. They walked me down a very long hallway because she was a preemie, so she was in the NICU. And I see this tiny little baby in her little incubator, and I collapse, and the nurse picked me up, and of course they've got that amazing Southern accent. She's like, oh my God, you're just an angel, we love this. I was like, oh, what? I was so out of it. And then of course I'm looking at her and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Then they give her to me, they just take my shirt off. They're like, skin to skin, let's go. All of a sudden it's a wet t-shirt contest up in that NICU. What's happening? And they plop this baby on me. They're like, let's try to give her a bottle. I was like, well, okay. Then you're like, I'm gonna break this tiny little baby. I don't know what's happening. And of course I was like, get a picture, mask off, hey. Yeah. Then she's sleeping. She doesn't open her eyes the entire time because she's a day old, 4 pounds, 7 ounces. She's probably like, what's happening? Full head of hair though, a lot of hair. Everybody keeps coming in, talking to me. I still am like, I don't know what's happening. I think that was the biggest thing. What am I supposed to feel?
Right.
And then I realized that even if I had carried her in my stomach, I don't know if you know what I mean? You don't know what it's still a stranger.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's almost, for me, it was almost disbelief that they're mine forever.
Yes.
Really? No one, really?
Really? This is, and then a month later, you're like, forever? You're like, oh my God. So I put her back in. I hadn't even checked into the hotel yet. And I was like, I have to check into the hotel. They're like, yeah. So I put her back, and a friend of mine was like, say affirmations to the tiny baby. She can't see, in front of her very far, so get really close. So I did. I got really close, and I was like, you're healthy, you're strong, you're beautiful, you're loved, you're safe. I love you, whatever I said. And then I said, eyes still closed, the entire time I was there, just a sleeping baby that could, it's so tiny. And then I said, I'll be back tomorrow. So it makes me upset. And her eyes just bolted open immediately, just like your eyes did, and we locked.
Wow.
And the nurse went, oh, ma. And then waterworks. I was crying. And that was it.
That's your love.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the chills now. And then I called my dad on the way out because my dad was also freaking out. And I go, that's my daughter. Because I remember David was like, just go to Kentucky. Everyone was like, Chantel was like, just go to Kentucky. Everyone was like, just come to Kentucky. Just go to Kentucky. Everyone was like, you just got to see the baby. I was like, what do I do when I see the baby? Is it my baby? Is it my daughter? I don't know.
Right.
I had no time to prepare. I didn't know anything about her health background, nothing. And then I got there and then I was like, oh, that's my daughter. And then cut to a month later, I'm crying. I'm like, I'm going to have to give her back. I'm going to have to return all the gifts. I'm going to just break my dad's heart. I think that's what every mother goes through. I'm like, why did I think I could do this all by myself? And now she's 4 and we're in it.
You got
together.
through it.
Oh yeah. I remember having that freak out, coming back in, looking at her. There was a lot of talks between me and her. I did a lot of the talking, but I was like, we're in this together. Do you understand? And she was just like crying. And I'm like, no, I can cry too. We can cry together, but we're in it together. And she's like, okay. It's a roller coaster of emotions. And my daughter was also born with meth in her system. But thankfully, because of Vista, I had, the classes. And I think a lot of my friends, actually, a lot of people in general, because I talk about it openly on stage in a funny way. But I think people are like, oh my God, she had meth in her system. Oh my God, the birth mother used meth during her pregnancy. And I didn't actually know until I took the course, what the drugs do and that alcohol, correct me if I'm wrong, is the worst thing a pregnant woman can do.
Ongoing and severe, yes.
Yes.
There's plenty of people that don't know they're pregnant that were at a party.
Yes.
And we all, actually, most of our parents, we all turned out okay.
Yeah.
It's the severity and it's the severity throughout.
Yes.
And obviously the type. And the reason why I bring that up is because there are some women, denial is a powerful thing.
Yes.
And they're 6 months along before they're like, right? And they've lived their life. And if living their life is having a few beers or on the weekends with their friends or wine when they go out to dinners, or I wouldn't discourage people from moving forward with that.
Right.
I would take a pause if someone is an alcoholic.
Yes.
And the baby was exposed to ongoing. That's where I would take a pause.
Right.
So it's a hard thing because we're ingrained in us, no alcohol for good reason. But in the adoption world, when women are not planning, hoping, or wanting to be pregnant, they're going to have a longer span before the aha moment is there.
Right.
And I don't want people to be too severe in their profile of what they're open to and then not get presented.
Right. No, that's a great point. David brought it up too, I think when we were on the phone, because it all like blends together. But when the birth mother listed, that she uses methamphetamines she didn't know she was pregnant until she was 7 months pregnant.
Right,
she said she had stopped right before maybe a month before, but my daughter tested positive for it, but she didn't have any withdrawals. She didn't detox at all, very healthy. And I remember David explaining to me again, reiterating go see the baby. I've worked with a lot of babies that were, and actually the doctors in the NICU too were also really, really helpful and reassuring, with my daughter. And of course I was like, well, what should I look out for? Are there certain things that I should be paying attention to? And he's like, well, I remember he was like, she could have digestive issues. And I'm like, well, we're Jewish, so that's going to happen.
It's there anyway.
It's already happening. I'm having it right now. And then he was like, and maybe at school age, start paying attention. There could be some ADHD. She could be at higher risk for ADHD. And of course, I'm like, there are so many kids that have ADHD. And their parents ate vegan organic throughout their entire pregnancy, didn't touch unfiltered water and their child, you know what I mean? So I was like, okay. And he was very much like, I believe in nurture versus nature.
And remember how much growth the brain does the first 3 years of life.
It's a lot, right?
And I bring this up because for those that are watching that are considering this, I'm not a doctor.
Right.
I am a doctor actually, but I'm not a medical physician.
Right.
And so this is not medical advice.
Right.
But if you're going through the process of deciding what you want to be open to, be aware that when you look at the studies about how substance affects children prenatally, look at the children in the families that were studied. Because the vast majority of those studies are done on children who are still in the home where they were born, which means they're still in the home with the person who is struggling with addiction and sobriety. Okay, so that's hard to account for environmental factors that way if you're still in the home. Right? Or the studies are conducted in following foster children who were taken out of the home due to maybe a positive toxicology at birth or other issues. But then how do you then tease out the environmental factors that affect a child developmentally when they go through the foster care system and they have a disrupted attachment or multiple disrupted attachments?
Right.
And all those things that happen when you're in foster care. So to say that a child has prenatal exposure and thus, given that this is going to be our sample population, jump to the behaviors as being a direct correlation to the substance use prenatal, that to me is a big leap because the environmental factors are extremely significant.
So, I mean, I think it's so significant looking at a lot of my people that I grew up with or people that I know that came from really bad homes, like a lot of trauma, and they themselves struggle with addiction because of that. When no one else in their family had addiction, they weren't even born with, you know what I mean? It's like I can only imagine if you're still in the home with the family that is still struggling with addiction and you were born with it and you know what I mean, like not being removed from there. I can only imagine how it adds on to that. It's just a lot of trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma.
And I'm not saying it doesn't affect at all, but I can tell you that over 20 plus years I've been doing this, when we have alumni picnics, gatherings, everything, and the kids are running around and playing and having a good time and climbing and jumping and laughing and eating, you cannot point out which of these children were prenatally exposed.
Right.
So I'm just putting that out there. I don't want to say it's nothing.
Right, of course.
But I'm saying it is something you can navigate, especially if you're aware and you're willing to roll up your sleeves when necessary.
Right.
I would just encourage people to do their research.
Right.
But look at the research that you are examining to account for environmental factors.
I also remember more you guys than David, but reminding me about, what I'm looking for. And being open to certain things. Because if I was like, I only want a boy, or I only want a closed adoption, or I only want this ethnicity or this, it would have limited, obviously, the birth families that were presented to me. And I was open to everything, basically. But there was a section too. Are you open to a child that was exposed? To drug use or alcohol use. And I remember, I think alcohol was the only thing that I was kind of like hesitant on. Right. But yes, but that was also because I'd already spoken to you guys and to David, but everything else I was like wide open. And it still definitely took me a year and a half. And I have another friend, her and her husband, I did not know this until I already, got Mackenzie, that they went through Vista and David the exact same time that I did. They were getting birth mom possibilities like 3 or 4 a week. And I only got maybe 6 or 7 total in the year and a half. And I was, because a lot of people now come up to me and ask me like, what was your experience like? I'm also single. And I remember thinking to myself, it seemed like straight couples were the top choice, and then like gay couples, and then single woman, single male, as far as the pecking order of how many, birth mom or birth parent possibilities I was getting comparatively.
You would think, I would say 20, 15 years ago, maybe even 10, that would have been correct. First of all, interestingly enough, the single men get a lot of attention because they stand out.
Oh, they do? Oh,
there's so few of them, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So they tend to stand out, like, because they get a second look. I'll give it that.
Right.
Okay. As far as couples versus singles, I'm not sure because a lot has to do with profile openness.
Right.
Right. And you're a single woman and you nailed it dead center in the bell curve of waiting time.
Right.
Okay. So A+.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Right. So I don't want to discourage anybody who's single.
No, I don't want to either. Yeah.
And many, many years ago, I would have said, same-sex couples came to us and said, are people going to be reticent to choose us as a same-sex couple?
Right.
And I don't know the answer back then.
Right.
But I don't see the hesitancy now. And even if an expectant mom calls us and thinks she has, and we see this all the time, she has the parameters of what she wants to choose.
Okay.
And then ultimately, she tells us, I want this, and I want to look at this right. I want one stay-at-home household, blah, blah, blah. And then but send me, anybody who's open to my situation. I don't know, half the time or more, they pick somebody that's not in the scope of what they thought because that person reminded them of their kindergarten teacher who they loved, or they're a 49ers fan, or a Rage Against the Machine fan, or something that's nuanced that they're like, oh, it's fate.
Right.
Right. And so they find something that, oh, they like them. And lo and behold, they're love Disneyland, and I do too. So there's something that makes them feel like it's fate.
Right.
And then there has to be that personality click and connection.
Right.
And then it's meant to be. And that match allows this expectant mother to feel like the world's not so upside down.
Right.
That there is a plan and that things are going to be okay. So while you're sitting there hoping to get picked, hoping that she likes you, she's on the other end saying, oh my gosh, what if she doesn't like me?
Right.
And there's so much more in common of this emotional experience than you would think.
I mean, I can imagine. I think my experience was a little bit different because she had,
last minute.
Yes, because she had given birth and then
Right.
she looked at the and she had been through this, this was my daughter was her 13th pregnancy.
Wow.
And she had been through this, obviously before. But I can tell you that now I also know, I think I knew, well, actually it was Chantilly who called me up afterwards to just tell me she knew. She's like, I know why Vicky chose you just based on meeting her because she's very funny. Like, she didn't say I chose her because she's funny. She told me later that because I work I didn't say that I was a stand-up, but I said I am a comedy writer, which is also true, and I work on a show, so my daughter will be filled, her life will be filled with laughter, which it is. She's also very funny. My daughter is very, very funny, and that's a combination between her birth mom and me, 100%, because Vicky is very funny, and I know that she read that and was like, oh, she's funny. That was it. You know what I mean? Immediately. And then Chantilly just told me that she was so hilarious in the best possible way that she knew it was a match.
Right.
And it's hard when it happens like that, when it's like the baby's already born and they're just like, boom, she just picked it and was like, let's move forward.
And you hope it's a click.
Yes, it was a click. And again, David, when he told me that I was selected, I lost my hearing. I remember losing my hearing. Like, everything kind of was like spinning. And my knee-jerk reaction was like, this isn't my baby. This is my baby. I don't know anything about this woman. I don't know. I was so scared. I was like, let's just wait for the next one. It had been like a year. Like, what am I thinking? You know what I mean? And David could sense that I was losing my marbles and said, this is a very stressful way this can happen, but it's also the best way.
Yeah.
There was no father, that nobody could find this person. She had sex with a dude in a car. No judgment, because I've done it many times. So she's like, I don't know, you know what I mean? So that was already, it was a kind of a done deal. And I was going to ask you, I know another couple that had matched with a birth mom. They went all the way through in the delivery room, and then the birth mom changed her mind. Mm-hmm. How often does that actually happen?
I would say about 30% of the time,
mm-hmm.
maybe the adoption doesn't go through after the baby's born.
For that reason or other reasons? Or
it could be another reason. It could be that the adoptive parents back out, maybe because something comes out at the birth that they realize they're not open to.
Okay.
And it could be a positive toxicology.
Right.
We don't want people moving forward with adoption if it doesn't feel right, even after the birth.
Of course.
And it's really devastating to the expectant mom or birth mom by then. But we will help her find a family that is the right family, because we also, and this is a good kind of pivot here that I've noticed in our conversation, we want a woman who struggles with sobriety.
Yes.
Is not a bad person.
No.
Right? It's an ongoing disease. And just because you're pregnant, that part of the disease doesn't go away.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that there isn't shame involved. Right? So now we have, on top of this really, really difficult situation she's in, she knows she's struggling with addiction and the shame that brings. Mm-hmm. And so for her, coming to the table saying, this is what's going on, can I match with somebody who is not going to judge me for this, is hard. And sometimes it's too hard and they aren't as clear. Right? Our job as an agency and professionals everywhere, we really do a good job, hopefully, of saying the right match is really important. And if you tell us what's going on, that's how we find you the right match.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Right? And you're sitting here raising your daughter, imbuing her with a love for her birth mom.
Love her.
And that, even though Vicky struggles with this, and that doesn't make her a bad person. And I think that's really important to put out there too. That judgment can be felt by women who are making this plan. And to be aware of your own prejudices when going into it.
Absolutely.
Because your daughter's going to benefit from the love and the look in your eye she sees when you talk about her birth mom.
Yeah.
And so she knows she came from a good place.
Yes.
And that's really important.
That is really important. Yeah. I didn't even think of it like that. I mean, I thought of a lot of those things that you were saying, but even more about when I talk about Vicky, I want her to, yes, know that she came from a good place. I don't want there to be shame around Vicky's backstory. I don't. It makes me sad that Vicky had that is her backstory. That was her life. That's been her life, her experience. She's just also a resilient human being. Every time we have any interaction, and we text, you know what I mean. We're definitely at a text. All of us. We're all the moms and her, and you know, for her birthday, we sent her a cake. She loves sheet cake and she likes ice cream. You know, she's in a better relationship than I've ever been in. She's with like this guy for like 3 years. They rent a place. I mean, it's great. He works at the car wash. We love Billy too. It's just, yeah. I want Mackenzie. I don't want her to have any shame.
Right.
I don't want there to be shame there. And I mean, there might be. There's only so much I can do. You know what I mean? I don't know how she's going to feel. I want to just be open about everything and have that open line of communication. And I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes, as people do, obviously, just as a parent. Every day I'm always like, I'm fucking up my child. Like, what's happening? But yeah, I think it was a lot of people that are not familiar with open adoption. When I tell them that not only do I have an open adoption, but, you know, I text with the birth mom, and we occasionally will send her, yes, on Mother's Day or, you know, her birthday, you know, a food, like, what would you like to eat? You know, anything you want, you know what I mean? Because I would do that for any one of my friends, and I love this person. She gave me the greatest gift. And then also, you know, gave my friends the greatest gift. You know what I mean? Those gifts are friends that they're growing up knowing. And, you know, now, you know, so they again, they went through the foster to adopt program with their eldest son. And of course, it was sort of happening during COVID, but there was a lot of ups and downs. So that's why I knew they wanted to adopt again, but they were probably going to just do adoption because it was
Domestic
really hard.
adoption,
It was really hard. And that also, it's crazy how our lives are so intertwined, because they were a huge inspiration for me adopting. And I used to get birth mom profiles, and she would come and help me look through them, cut to me calling her and saying, I know you guys want to adopt again. My daughter's birth mother is pregnant again. If you want this to happen, like, and it did.
That's amazing.
It's kind of amazing. And they look so much alike, and they sound so much alike. It's kind of crazy.
That's great.
And I don't have to raise him. That's like the best part. It's like, I don't have 2 kids, but like, she gets the benefit of sort of having a
She has
sib.
a connection.
Yeah, she has a connection. And they all do, because they have similar stories, even, you know, his other brother.
Right.
Which I think is really, really important. How do you keep that community together?
Well, we have a couple different ways. For the parents, we have ongoing parenting support groups. So they get online together virtually and talk about what's going on parenting adoptees, share with each other. We have a social worker facilitated to offer guidance and feedback. For the families as a whole, with the kids, we actually have events on our campus.
Yeah.
Where we bring in bounce houses and arts and crafts, and we have a playground, and the kids play, and we have a potluck, and a lot of times we'll do it like right before Halloween, so the families dress up together.
Right. Yes, we meant to go this past one, but my daughter got a UTI, not bragging. I mean, hey, girls, am I right? But yes, you do. Whenever I see the newsletters and, you know, the social media posts, it's just an amazing community.
Right. The newsletters are for our clients to let us know those things happening.
Yeah.
But then also for the adoption community in general, we do a program once a month called Foundations for Growth. It's on a Saturday. Okay. And it's for the adoption community as a whole. I mean, it could be nationwide because everything's virtual these days. Mm-hmm. And we have a keynote speaker on something having to do with raising adoptees. Right. And there's a 1 hour where they speak on their expertise. Right. And then there's a back and forth question answer session. Right. And people talk to each other and talk to the keynote speaker and gain community and education through that. So it's kind of an educational support community that we do once a month. And that's open for everybody, not just Vista families. That's amazing. That's such an amazing thing that you guys do, because I feel like it's needed. I mean,
Yeah, it's hard enough to raise a child. Every parent, in my opinion, is like, oh my God, how are you doing? Like, how are we all doing it? We all have that look in our eyes. You know what I mean? When you become a parent, you just like have that look like, I'm a little broken, like really happy, but also like, ooh. Yeah, so it's really great to have a community. And then, yeah, raising adoptees, there's a whole set of other things.
There are layers.
Yes, yeah, a lot of layers. Now, what do you guys do? So when you work with like the birth mom, is there like, do you also offer support to them ongoing after?
Absolutely. Sometimes it's helpful if they're connected to another birth mom.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's helpful. There's virtual support groups that are nationwide. And listen, the pandemic left us reeling in so many ways.
Yeah.
And something that came out of it that we still, thank goodness, take with us is that the interconnectivity of everybody nationwide and the barriers that are now longer and the obstacles no longer there.
Right.
So those types of support groups are offered virtually now that weren't there before the pandemic. So that, and then we call it a birth mom buddy system. So if any birth mom wants to be connected to another birth mom, nice. We'll look for what her circumstance is. We have like an ongoing sheet and which birth mom she might connect best to.
Right.
And that actually can happen prior to the placement if she wants to talk to somebody who's been through it before.
Wow, that's
an option.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Before we wrap up, what do you see like? Because you've been in this over 20 years, 30 years, 20?
20 plus.
20 plus. We'll just say 20 plus. I mean, obviously there are things that need to be improved in that, and you know, the agency in Kentucky to me wasn't as it seemed a little weirder, especially because she just gave birth. They contacted me. They're like, now give us a lot of money. And I was like, I don't even know you. I don't even know what's happening. And I felt very much just sort of like, I don't even know what I felt. I didn't feel supported at all by that. And I get they were there for Vicky, but it was very weird. It seemed like it was a much different experience. And I know there are flaws in the system, as there are in every system, but what would you like to see improved, or what are you trying to improve in that system as a whole?
That's a good question. There is a lot of variance to how adoption is practiced across the United States, in general, because there's got cultural, political sways that are different, and areas that are considered more progressive or whatnot. I think that what I've seen is trajectory, because when I came into this, like I said, back in the day, openness was super controversial and fringe. Right. Now it's pretty much accepted across the board, which is great, and encourage, actually, say I would say by adoption agency professionals, okay, but I'd like to see it done in a way where adoptive parents are educated in a way that they understand it's in their benefit to have a structure of what that openness is going to look like at the front end, because I think that it can feel like uncomfortable conversations to have when everybody's kind of in the mix of it. And the gut is, oh, we're fine. We love each other. It'll just work out. And sometimes agency professionals, that's an okay answer, because in the moment, you don't really want to push people outside their comfort zone. What I would encourage, I would say the landscape as a whole in adoption practice to reflect more is having more structure in, what is it really going to look like tangibly over the years? Not that it can't organically change and grow, but if I'm not trying to mind read you and you're not trying to mind read me, then our anxieties go down. So I've had situations where I feel like one party is reaching out a lot to the other party, and lo and behold, there was no agreement to what the contact is going to look like. So all that reaching out has a lot to do with the anxiety of, am I ever going to see or talk to them again? But if you know that like every few months you guys are going to exchange pictures, texts, whatever it is, ongoing, then there's less anxiety and the need to reassure yourself that the other party is not going anywhere. So education on the front end is important. For all parties. And then for professionals to remind at the juncture that it's appropriate, listen, guys, we really should create a contact agreement. Not that it can't grow and change, but it then allows you to have mutual expectations of what it's going to look like, and you're not mind reading and having misunderstandings.
I'm so glad you said that, because for me, the contract said like every 4 months, update birth mom with pictures and, an email. But it was just kind of like lost in there. I mean, I was reading it and I definitely took it. But when I sent her that first email, which by the way, when I hit send, I was like, because I wanted to meet her when I was there. we didn't meet. She was there and she checked out we were there at the same time, and then she checked out like that night. So I didn't get to meet her, which I really wanted to do, but that's totally fine. So when I sent the pictures and I hit send, I was like, oh God, yeah, my heart. Yes.
Right. You felt vulnerable, exposed, scared.
Everything. Yeah. All of the things. And I was already in that state because I was going through my own like little postpartum adoption thing.
Which is the thing.
Which is the thing. People don't, yes, I've definitely been very open talking about that. I definitely am someone that I do not suffer from depression, but it was for the first time I was like, what is this that I'm feeling? It was really, and it was, a lot of things. Hormones, also the realization that my old life is no longer. It's the death of your old life. You really have to grieve that. You have to be prepared. Doesn't matter how you become a parent. You have to be aware that that life
is different forever.
Forever. And, obviously for the better, but it's going to take a second. It's definitely going to take a hot minute because I was in my late 40s, so I'd been by myself for a very long time. But so I hit send and she sent an email back, I'd say within an hour, really, really quickly. And I was sobbing. She was like, oh my God, to open this email and to see pictures, I've never seen any of my babies. So I think the 2 adoptions prior were also open. I don't know if they were in Kentucky. I don't know where they're from. And they never
followed through.
And Vicky wasn't going to do anything. She was just like, whatever. And then I think her other kids went to relatives, or you know what I mean. But she was like, to see one of my babies, she's like, you're an angel. Oh my God, I'm so upset we didn't get to meet in person. And thank you for taking my beautiful girl. I wish I could. It was everything that when my daughter gets old enough to read it and understand it, she's going to be so happy. And then the emails that followed afterwards were even more incredible. And then she said, could I ask one thing of you? Could you just give her one kiss from me? And I said, I'll do you one better, Vic. Already, I'm like, let's do this, Vic. I'm like, I will kiss her every night and tell her that's from Vicky. And I have. From that moment on, every night when I kiss her goodnight, she gets one from me and one from Vicky. So she knows, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then, we went back and forth, and that's how I wasn't like, I don't want to wait 4 months.
Right.
And it did happen organically. Right. And I think that's the thing. Some people I remember David telling me specifically, like, the birth mom could eventually fade out of the picture once she knows that child is safe or has moved on. And, Vicky is not, and I don't want her to go anywhere. We obviously all care about her and love her. And, when she was pregnant with, my daughter's half-sib, everybody was all in touch. I am actually envious of we're jealous of my friends that got to spend time with her because they did. And they're like, she's amazing. And, so one day,
it will happen.
One day we will go to Kentucky. Thank you so much for coming on here and talking about this. It's very near and dear to my heart. And I will have all of your information listed when this episode comes out. So if anybody's considering adoption or fostering, which again, one day I might be doing that, they will have the resources. They will contact you guys and get the resources and have the information on how to do that.
We're Vista Del Mar, Los Angeles.
Vista Del Mar, yay! Thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I'm Jodi Miller. Don't call me ma'am, but you can call me mom. Hey! Thanks for tuning in to Don't Call Me Ma'am. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you never miss an episode. See you next time.